So Jaime, welcome to the stage. Jamie's from Climb, GM of Advice, I believe. You're a stand-in, you've come in at the last minute.
I am, so bear with me.
Okay, we're going to cover off a standardising circumstances, ethical, ESG, looking at premium filters, capital tax stuff, all that fun gear.
All of that.
All good on you. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. So clearly I'm not Will Riggle, our CIO, but I'm the General Manager of Advice. The thing that I'd probably share is Will's probably the most favourite person in the Climb business for me right now. And the reason is it relates to the advice needs of the advice community. So within the Climb group, yes, there is an alignment. We have Madison, which is advisors who are self-employed, and we have around sort of 70 firms. But we also have broadened the advice offering for those who had been interested or in Madison transitioning to self-license. So this particular space around managed accounts is quite topical across all of those advice firms in which we're dealing with. And the value piece is really growing in significance more and more. And Will is a real enabler to that value piece and efficiency piece for these practices. So it's probably why I enjoy hanging out with him so much. There's our disclaimer. So what I'll do is I'll give you, some insight into what we're seeing across those advice firms, because within Climb, our investment solutions team actually provides solutions to not just the in-house model of Madison and Optimise. We also provide these solutions to other licensees and other private wealth firms. So within, the individualisation and who and why is this important, I guess a lot of it has been driven in the early stages from the practices we work closely aligned with around the equity space. And it's grown into the managed fund space, and then we've looked at having a combination of equities and managed funds within managed accounts. We also have the retail and the wholesale side. So when you think about managed accounts in the retail space, we're dealing with SMAs, MDAs, etc. And then we do a lot of time and effort around individually managed accounts, which sits with our wholesale investors, family offices, etc., who come for support in this particular space. A lot of consulting is being done around the SAA and the DAA and where that fund selection sits. If I think about what Will's doing that is of value, it is sitting in that consulting piece to make sure what's being scoped is really relevant to the advice solution and the advice and value proposition of what those firms are trying to achieve for their clients. What we're seeing is there can't be a one-size-fits-all for these firms. So whether they're retail or whether they're wholesale, and it's why, we talk about this individualisation, because you just can't pick up the same standard model for an investment solution and think that that's going to fit every advice firm that we're dealing with. And naturally, a lot of the conversation has been driven around cost and efficiency. So the customised solutions, the space in which we're seeing the most traction is sitting more probably in the high net worth space when it's coming to those IMAs and ultra high net worth, but also within those individual practices for the managed account solutions. The interesting thing I think about the individualisation is the centrepiece. So it's a no-brainer. We know that there's more efficiency in the advice process by seeing managed accounts come into a practice. And Investment Trends have put out some really great data around this. But the advisor perception of value and the client perception of value. And if I talk to the experience I've had with advisors in between this piece, in the past there'd been probably a little bit of pushback at times where advisors hadn't adapted or evolved managed accounts into their investment philosophy, because that was where they felt that their value piece sat. Now, would a client perceive the value in that piece? maybe not. There's some good insight that Net Wealth have provided around where clients perceive the value with their advisor, but it had been either sometimes an advisor enjoys doing that portfolio construction, and that's where they've anchored the value piece, or they've just not taken the time to articulate where that CVP sits for the business, and they've gravitated to the portfolio construction and sort of shied away from managed accounts. But I think the value piece of the advisor and the client is now starting to become more closely aligned. Complexity around what investment solutions are looking like. I think that we've added the complexity. So a lot of our conversations are actually driven from simplification. They want a more simple model in their business that they can execute portfolios and changes to. So we're trying to, I guess, in many cases, take the consulting lens first to look at how you can simplify most things that have been made complex when they didn't actually need to. And then obviously identifying where's the sophistication. So literally saying that a client is a high net worth client does not mean that they're a sophisticated client. So having a good conversation with the client and the advisor then being able to articulate the characteristics of their clients, not just, bucket everyone into high net worth, then allows the solution to be more fit for purpose. So on this slide, I look at these as some of the advice drivers when you're looking at what is the right solution fit for a managed account in a business. So what drives the client for the advice, what's driving the client for the outcome, and what solutions or considerations need to be given for the advisor to find the right solution for these clients. And in many cases, another overlay of all of this is cost. So if we start with where's liquidity, where's the risk sitting in the portfolio, and if we think about clients, as I said, a lot of it had been driven by clients holding direct shares if they're wanting to in-specie transfer these shares into some of the managed accounts that we're helping look after. We've heard a bit today, and we're hearing a lot, and we'll continue to hear a lot around ESG and what that means in a portfolio construction. And the layers of what green looks like for one client will be very different from one to another. And the art of asking these great questions with the advisor and the client relationship allows the advisor, as I said, to articulate to an investment manager, to a consultant, to make sure the solution will be fit for purpose. And tax. So in many cases, there's that additional benefit of these structures being more tax effective. So within best interest duty, if I relate this again back to the where does the advisor see value, where does the client see value, best interest duty always has to be valuable back to the client. And I think if we look at the benefits of the customisation, these don't all now relate to benefits for an advisor. These are tangible benefits that relate to the advice position of a client. The timeliness of being able to manage their money within that structure without not having to do the additions of ROAs. You can see it strengthens the value proposition for an advice firm. So there's many layers under best interest that benefit the client as an end result, not just that advice firm. So this is a good, graph in terms of where's the time saving. We've seen over periods of time that we're now consistently starting to see more time being saved by advice firms who have adopted managed accounts in some shape within their practice. Now, the other thing I like to highlight about this is not just the time saving. What I've seen in large firms especially, when they've adopted this, is they're giving a more consistent advice process to clients across the firm. So when you might have 4 or 5 advisors in a practice and you have a very clear and strong investment philosophy and you're constructing portfolios with the same methodology, there's a consistency there across each advisor. It doesn't mean that everyone's portfolios are the same. You could be using the managed account in a core position and choosing the appropriate satellite investments to complement that. But there's a reduced risk to that firm when there's a consistency around how they're adopting an investment philosophy. So I look at the time saving as brilliant. Yep, you can start to see some more clients, you can reduce the cost to serve, but I think the other significant benefit here is the reduced risk that happens to a firm where there's multiple advisors. This is a great graph from NetWealth that shows the time period of how managed accounts have evolved, where that starting point was when you look at the model of models and the evolution of technology playing in this space over time. So platforms I see as the real enabler of how managed accounts have evolved in this particular advice space. And interestingly, there's some, greenwashing is quite a topical thing at the moment. ASIC had been very clear in the first quarter of this year that that was going to be surveillance that they were looking at aside from DDO. There were 2 key areas, and we're starting to see more and more media around the greenwashing. If you look at what Praemium are doing as an example around their screen Sustainalytics, that's another layer of protection that you have when you're choosing a managed account that sits on that platform. So if you think about the technology layer and you think about, where the regs are going and the ASIC requirements and you acting in the best interests of your client, technology is really playing a great reduced risk position for you using those managed accounts. They're going through another screening layer that you don't have to then stress and worry about. Also from, our space, non-custody is another huge part. So when we're dealing with a lot of high net worth individuals and technology being that enabler and platforms being that enabler, having the ability to have consolidated reporting and the technology streamlining that process is another factor of when we're working with a firm. What are all those advice drivers, as I said? What are the things that your client wants? What are the things that you want to give for a client experience? And so for us, it's thinking about not just what managed accounts sit on what platforms, but what else do those platforms do to help solve the advice needs of these clients? And for us, we're seeing that non-custody piece being a real key in the solution suite. So increasing demand, as I said, for high net wealth and ultra high net wealth. This is a good graph again that states the importance versus where the satisfaction layers are from a client experience perspective. Clients want quality of service. They want technology that works, that's easy to use, just as the advisor does. But again, coming back to that piece that I said, within the technology, that non-custody piece is a big one for us, and making sure that there's a technology or a platform solution that's going to deliver all of the advice drivers that we need. Education. So I look at some of that investment trend data, and there's some real quality pieces in there, but I often question how people are answering those questions as advisors doing those surveys. Are they just thinking purely separately managed accounts because they're sitting in a retail environment, or are they thinking about managed accounts in that broader aspect of what that means? So I think education's a big piece here from not just an advice perspective, but also education, obviously, for your clients. And what we're trying to do is create more and more simplification of education material so that advisors can value and use that in their client experience. The personalised offer, we're spending a lot of time in this space, and it's sitting, as you would imagine, in the ultra high net worth clients. They're looking for more personalised individual accounts, and we're working in some cases either with the licensees which have the advisors in that AFSL, or at times we're also working with asset managers with advisors who have gone and adopted their own AFSL. So in that private space, if I think about, you know, who's sitting in this space that we actually service and give advice to now, it does tend to be those advisors who have got their own AFSL, or they're within a AFSL licensee who allows them to play in that wholesale space. One of the keys to success here is if you don't have a clear investment philosophy and you haven't got clarity around the portfolio construction and the decision making, then the managed account will not benefit the client with the same ability and success as what you would have where there's a strong governance and clarity around the investment offer. So if practices are not willing to put that layer of governance, or those practices who have their own AFSL, then it creates weaknesses within that framework. So it's one of the things that we try to stress. How can we help support you? Perhaps it's with your own investment committee process. Perhaps it's working more closely with an asset consultant if that's someone that you're using. But those other professionals all need to be on the same page in order to support these private labels being successfully executed within advice firms. We all know that there's efficiency from an ROA perspective, not having to make those changes and get those advice documents out. But like I said, even on the other side, where in a wholesale environment and the private offices that we're looking at, well, ROAs are out the window in that particular area, but there's still strength around the advice process, even when it sits in a wholesale space, at how well you're educating and articulating what you're doing. What's important here, though, is that there's transparency. And I know we've got transparency there under the customer because it's driven by them. But I'd have to say technology, in most cases, is again the enabler of the transparency. So if you're looking at solutions, you want solutions that bring you stronger reporting. So this is an example of a business that we'd been working really closely with. We've got so many lately, but we'll just look at this one. So they had a history of coming out of broking. There was a father and a son business. The father has retired many years ago now. They've both been in advice. Well, the father had been in stockbroking for about 40 years, and now the son has an accounting firm and an advice firm. And the portfolio of these clients does predominantly sit in a direct equities portfolio, or they might be using a combination of some managed funds. But most of these clients would be, you know, high net worth to farming clients. So there'd been strong structures in place for these clients, but what we could see is the drain and the inefficiency around the advice process. The amount of work that was happening for this firm around executing the trades, dealing with corporate actions, the reporting, the ROAs. We've been able to come in and actually put a new framework around this firm, around the efficiencies of how they can manage these portfolios ongoing. So we've got an investment committee process that sits within that firm. We're working really closely around aligning a platform that will let them execute with more efficiency. So the need for simplification is actually what we needed more than anything in this firm, by simplifying their advice offering and leveraging managed accounts in two layers. One, from a separately managed account perspective, and then secondly, for an individually managed account perspective, has brought a more simplified model into this firm and more efficiency and clarity around how they're managing a client's portfolio and being able to articulate that. So in conclusion, I don't think I need to really repeat all of those things. I've said them multiple times throughout the course of those slides. But I think from a future perspective of where advice firms are actually going and the efficiencies that they're trying to gain, you know, there's a place around how managed accounts can bring that depth to your advice business. And even when you think about increased valuations of people who are looking to sell in the future, it allows an easier transition of what can happen when there's a bit more structure and governance around that component of their business. So thank you.
Thank you, Jaime.